Hello, everyone. I'm Benj. This is What Could Be Bad. Very excited to be here at the Vilar Performing Arts Center in Beaver Creek, Colorado, as part of Mountains and Minds, a mental health summit to strengthen community. And the purpose of this is to elevate and destigmatize mental health conversations. And I'm very honored that Chef Robert Irvine, a friend and mentor to me, is here to have a discussion on mental health. Welcome, Chef.
Well, that's very kind of you, a mentor. Now I'm humbled. So it's great. This is such a great place and such a great subject. I'm excited to dive in.
Good, very nice. And I look up to you in a lot of ways, the way you lead. I have a episode of the first season of What Could Be Bad where Pete Griffin mentioned something that another guest of mine, Paul Rykoff, who I know you know, Paul says we need people to lead from the front. And to me, that's about being a living example that people can learn from. And I feel that, your acceptance of my invitation to be a part of this is an example of how you do that leading. The foundation's work I've been lucky to be a part of in a small way over the years through OAR and partnering up on, basically the Breaking Bread with Heroes program, as well as just generally supporting the foundation. And that's an opportunity I don't take lightly, because you directly impact so many people's lives, and to even be associated with that is a distinct privilege in my life.
Well, it's kind. I feel, and we all know Paul, Afghanistan and Iraq veteran, a very vocal voice in our world today.
Yes.
For many great things. So, for me, leading is a very unique experience. As a young man starting in the Navy at the age of 15 and a half years old, because I was a bad kid. I was not a good kid.
We have that in common.
So my mother, in the audience, we got a chief of police here, so you got to take this the way it was. My father was in the Army. My brother was in the Army. I was a sea cadet at 11 years old. I started cooking at 11 because I thought that home economics was a way to get a girlfriend. I made my first quiche Lorraine. Girls went out the window. Sports came in, and food became a real pivotal part of my life.
Yeah.
I would wave goodbye to my mother, and then I would double back and drink my dad's beer. One day she called me at home. She called me, and I answered the phone. And I won't tell you the expletives that came through the phone, but the next day I was at the recruitment office, joining the Navy. And the coolest thing about that whole process, I was not a good kid at school. I enjoyed history, woodwork, sports. We were a poor family, very poor.
Okay.
My senior tutor would find opportunities for me to spend a week camping somewhere or those kind of things. So I had a very close relationship with my head of year, who knew I was troubled in a lot of different ways.
And head of year is like a
So
counselor?
You have your teachers that report to a senior tutor.
Okay.
And I would spend hours in his office every day. It was almost like therapy. And I look, after the last couple of days, I look back as that now and I say, oh my God, that was my therapy, or part of my therapy.
Yeah.
And he would ask me all the time, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? You got to go to school. But I didn't. School to me was boring. It was maths and English. I had a crush on my German teacher, but I spoke good German. But those were things I enjoyed.
Yeah.
So for me, when I joined the Sea Cadets at 11 and got to go to bases and warships and marine places and be amongst older people, for me it was a real eye-opener of what could be if I got to that point. And that point came when my mother phoned and I answered the phone and she took me to the recruitment office. Now, I am not the smartest guy on the planet. So I took my English and maths tests, 1 being the highest, 5 being the lowest. I got 5.5. Pretty superstar, right? And the recruitment officer said to me, well, I got some good news, Sonny. You're in Her Majesty's Royal Navy. And I went, yay. And he said, and you're going to be a cook. And I went, yay, because I really enjoyed the cooking process.
Yeah.
And
what is it about that really, like at a young age, I know it's obviously been a lifelong passion, but what immediately attracted you to that at that point?
well, at first it wasn't the food, it was the female, the girls,
Okay,
right?
fair enough.
Because I thought, I was an ugly kid. But that was the attraction. Then when I found out that pastry, eggs, bacon, onions, and cheese could make a meal, and my dad was a very plain eater. He was an Irish guy, 5 foot nothing and a bit, great football player, bit of an alcoholic when he came out of the military. But they kept him in the military simply because he was such a good football player.
Football is in soccer.
In soccer.
Okay,
Yeah.
just checking.
And I would come home and bring these quiches and these fricassees and the things I would make in home economics. And he would say, "What is this crap? What is this stuff?
Too fancy.
I don't eat that stuff."
Yeah.
And I was like, well, okay. And when I joined the Navy, for me, it was food became not only sustenance for 240 men on a warship, because we didn't have females on warships way back when in the Navy.
Yeah. There goes that idea of cooking will bring you closer to the ladies.
But, well, I love it now. It's
Yeah.
great. But we didn't have it there. And I remember having a boss, and this was where I was never fearful, because I think at youth, you don't have fear. Or I didn't have fear, let's put it that way. I was very, a big bravado, big mouth, big, ego kind of thing. And I remember when I first joined the Navy as my training, and I'd already been a Sea Cadet for many years, right? So I knew how to fold my uniform, I knew how to make my bed, I knew how to put my locker, I knew how to do things. And there I was with a group of people that were way older, in their 20s and 24 years old. And there's this little 15-and-a-half-year-old kid. Like, who are you guys?
Yeah.
And my boss said to me at one point, and there's a point to this story. When my boss said to me one day, "Oh, I'm not gonna graduate you to join the Navy." And I said, "What do you mean? I'm the best in the class." And I was. I did everything perfect. I was a physical fitness specimen in them days, not so much now, but and he said, "You're not a team player." I said, "What do you mean I'm not a team player?" He said, your uniforms are great, you're doing this, I'm not gonna move you on for your professional training, meaning cooking, because you're not a team player." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "Well, you've got to figure that out." And as a young, 15-and-a-half, 16-year-old kid saying, "I'm not a team player, I just take team sports," it didn't resonate with me, team.
Yes.
It did as a sports environment. But at 2:00 one morning, I wake up, I turn 16 people out of their beds onto the floor. And I said, "Okay, you people," not quite like that.
Sure.
"I'm going to teach you how to make your bed, clean your boots, press your uniform, and it took me 8 weeks to get them to that point." And why am I telling you that story? Because leadership is about knowing the people in which you work with. Empathetic leadership is what I wrote a book on.
Yes.
Is about understanding that Robert or Benj or Catherine or Lisa may have an autistic son or daughter or mother. And when they come to work, you have to understand why they can't perform their job because they've got other things on their mind. And I think we lose that empathy with workforces in our world. I mean, that's the first thing we have to understand, is who we're working with and what they're going through.
Yes.
And mental health starts with that, in childhood, of course, but in the workplace, we have to understand that. Trust, ego, yours and theirs. And then the number one or number four thing I think is authenticity. You can't have a boss that's up and down and you can't read how they are, because you stay away from them. Teams don't stay together if they don't trust you, you're not authentic, you don't listen to them. And I think that's what the military taught me, and I brought forward into all my companies and businesses, those four things.
It's wonderful. And the idea of empathetic leadership is something I feel like the world needs more of, because we're all being affected by more and more stimulus that is, hard to deal with. And I think your thought on that we're all dealing with things that we don't see is essentially the title of the podcast, What Could Be Bad. You don't always see what's behind that layer that people are showing you, right? We all have things that are going on in our lives that we don't actively discuss, and that we're all here trying to, that's what Mountains and Minds is. We're trying to get past the idea that it's not okay to share. And it is okay to share. That's why we're having this conversation. So a couple questions. One is just a thing, 15 and a half, 16 years old to enter into the military seems very young. The only other person I know who signed on that young is my wife's father, John Gary Biggs, who kind of snuck into the military at 17, and you beat him by at least a year. But what was the process of doing that? Is it different overseas than it is here?
It's different in England, I tell you, because if your parents both sign, see ya. You start off, my first station at 15 and a half was a place called Chatham. My brother was in the army at that point at Chatham Dean, learning how to play with explosives and things like this. He's 18 months older than me. I joined the Navy, because I was rebellious about two army guys. But I really enjoyed this food thing. And when I got to Chatham, which is the oldest ropery in England, by the way, from Trafalgar, so it makes ropes.
Oh, okay, well, yeah, there you
Ropery
go. I should have pulled that one out.
So if you think about famous naval battles, all the ropes for these ships were made at this place.
I see.
Very historic, and now it's gone and passed and used for whatever else. But for me, it was, I'm a big boy now. I'm in the Navy.
No more kid stuff.
But then they made me a class leader. That's where my fear started to happen. Because you're responsible for a group of people that come from all walks of life and have their own issues and their own traumas and their own stories. And it's up to me not only to understand them, learn their stories, but also teach them in a classroom setting of how to make food when they don't get it. You talk about, I always laugh when people say, what do you do? I make eggs. Well, that was my first class, how to make an omelet and how to make eggs, which sounds really
basic,
insane, but there's an art to making eggs.
Yes, there is. I could probably use a lesson or two, even though I try every day.
It's not just cracking them in a pan, and we get graded on these things. And for 8 weeks, I got to understand people that come from every walk of life and every part around England that I was now in control of.
So, teaching, okay, and the idea of passing on your knowledge to another person. And I'm curious, do you find a difference doing that in a military setting versus just generally in the world? Because I think there's something special about the camaraderie and brotherhood, sisterhood of being in that, knowing that, you may face dangers, things maybe not the same, for all of the service members, but, they're present.
I think the military, just like the police force and firefighters, EMTs, first responders, and it's really interesting because the parallels are the same, right? The military teaches you the fundamentals of, yes, how to keep your uniform, how to shoot a rifle, a gun, and do certain things. The police academy do the same thing. The firefighters do the same thing. What it does is bond you to people that you don't know, right? And what that chief was telling me, you're not a team player, is because when I go into those warships or those theaters of war, I have to depend on them, just like a firefighter does, a police officer does. So I think the military taught me loyalty, respect, dignity, teamwork, all those pillars that I use today in our companies. And I'm a big believer that we should have national service. And I don't mean everybody should join the military and get deployed I don't mean that. What I mean is service can come in any way, shape, or form, community service. But I believe that we should have a 1 year, everybody goes through a community program. And if it's in the military, great, not deployable overseas, but to learn those characteristics that make the human race a better place. Because it made me think more about what I was doing with them people that I was in charge of. Mm-hmm. And to the point that yes, you're on a warship, or yes, you're on a marine base, or yes, you're, I remember fear, and I will tell you fear. My first piece of fear was the year the electric wok came out. It was a turn-dial electric wok, and you cooked Chinese food in it. I was 16 years old at a place called Royal Naval Air Station Culdrose in Cornwall, and my boss said to me, a big jolly chap, chef, like you would expect to see a chef.
Sure.
He threw a booklet at me and said, hey, read this and cook this. Well, I'm like, okay. So I flipped through, I chopped chestnuts, water chestnuts, and onions, and bamboo shoots, and all these kind of things. And the door opens for lunch. And it was a wardroom where they all learned to fly helicopters. And there it was. They come in their flying suits. They got gold everywhere. And I'm like this little guy that's in a white T-shirt. And my rank was Jack, Junior Assistant Cook, because I was so young.
Yep.
Irvine, white shirt, little cap, and checkered pants. And my first customer happened to be, I'll tell you his name in a second. And I just said, yes, sir, how can I help you? He said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, really, I don't know, sir. I've just got this book and I'm reading from it.
Yeah.
So you're my first victim. And he said, well, I'll have some of that, 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 some of that. And that's the great. So I turn it up to high temperature, cook some salt, pepper, some soy sauce, some sambal oleg. And that guy said, thank you very much. The next guy came. And the same person came, had the same thing every day for 6 months. Huh. That person happened to be the Prince of Wales, King Charles, as we know him today.
Wow, I've not heard this story. That's amazing.
And once I wasn't fearful when I was doing it the first time, but when they told me who it was, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, yeah.
And that led to, almost anxiety, because I don't remember what I did yesterday. He just went, bum, 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 and I went, da, 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 and I served it. And I did that for 6 months. I started to get okay with it, and my boss says, you've been requested. I joined the Royal Yacht Britannia to work with the royal family, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah.
So the training, I think, was so important for me as a not so good kid, that put me in a role that made me grow up fast. From the Royal Yacht to the Falklands.
Yes.
A totally different environment, from a beautiful ship that was built in 1948, commissioned in 1952 by the King, and is now a museum in Edinburgh that I got to sail around the world on with the royal family, to go into a warship that's shooting bullets and things the size of a Volkswagen.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that there was two parts of that. The fear of cooking once I knew who it was, then the fear of going to a warship and going into harm's way.
I find it very interesting how people, when they're aware of what the circumstance, once you're cognizant of something that maybe, I don't know, should cause you some kind of to be more attentive to the details, like how that impacts your mind to react to it, rather than just the idea of even it being your first customer, or whatever, not customer, but surely, he's part of the royal family, not exactly the same thing, but you know what I'm saying. It's an interesting thing, the way our brains work, that will react to that in such a way that it instills actual fear and anxiety into our system.
And you change your behavior from when you don't care, and I don't mean don't care, but when you don't know, you don't care.
Yeah.
It's just, this is fun. Then it becomes serious.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to HMS Apollo, was my Majesty Ship Apollo, which was my first warship, 240 men. And we talk about morale and our first stop, I remember waving to my family, going to the Falklands. And I'm like, yeah, see you a couple of weeks, It was actually 78 days later, but we got to Ascension Island, which is a huge American Air Force base. And we got a day off. And there's one thing you don't get off very often in the military is on deployments. Mm-hmm. So we got to anchor and swim. And my boss said to me, he's a really stupid boss, by the way, you should put olive oil on your skin and just sunbathe on a gray liner. Ooh. Well, I did. I came out like a Belisha beacon, point red, and I couldn't move for 2 days. Oh. But again, going 4,000 miles and then traveling another 4,000 miles, the apprehension of going from a safe zone to a war zone. How do we make the ship's company doing? So my job in a war was not cooking. We put stuff in a steam kettle, we turned it on quarter of the way. Hopefully by the end of the action was over, we had some hot food to serve. And it'd be baked beans, tomatoes, sausage, meat in some kind of stewy broth, kind of form.
Yeah, whatever.
My job was actually to put missiles into, they were called chaff rockets. There were 8 of them, and my job was to resupply the chaff rockets, hang over the side of the ship, and put the plug in and screw it in to make sure the chaff is aluminum foil that directs or detracts a missile or any fire away from the ship itself. Well, I can tell you, I was so scared doing it, I probably only managed to get 3 of the plugs of the 8 in. Because it's so fast and you're wearing gloves and hats and anti-flash gear for burning. Again, that was the fearful part. Locked down in a small compartment, waiting to see if the ship was going to get hit or something was going to happen, and firefighting and all the things that you do outside of cooking. That was a whole different scope for me.
Yes.
Fear. I'm a young kid amongst what they call my sea daddies, these old guys who are like, oh, come on, son, you're all right, you're going to do this, you'll be fine, will be,
So when you're serving in the military and you're abroad, you're away from what is your usual support network, and you have to rely on the people that are around you if you have any issues. And I know years ago it was very different than the environment we're in now. And I want to acknowledge that the military is a big part of why the mental health conversation is becoming more mainstream, that they're, Paul educated me on what he called the don't beat your wife briefings when people left service.
Oh.
And so I want to ask, when you were leaving the service and transitioning out, how did it go for you? And what were some of the challenges that you felt like you were facing, having carried the weight of, all the experiences in your service?
In the military, and again, I'm paralleling it with the first responder community, because you surround yourself front, back, center, left, right. You're covered with people that you trust. When I was transitioning out, it's not like here in the United States where you have 18 months to transition. It's like you drop your packet, you're getting out, you're gone, see your checks in the mail.
Right.
There's no re-entering society, and I wasn't ready for that. I couldn't. We talked last night about sense of purpose. I had a sense of purpose when I was in the military. I knew my job. I knew I was the leader. I knew what to do in all facets of that world.
Yeah.
When I came out, I didn't know what to do. I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? I lived in the Midlands, Warsaw, Birmingham area, in the middle of England. I went to a hotel. I went to a restaurant first, and I hated it. Mm-hmm. These people were just cutthroat. There was no discipline. There was no loyalty. There was no respect. And I came from this great foundational source of those things.
Yes.
I left after, I think, I walked out on the second day of working there because I couldn't deal with the people. Then I found myself in a hotel.
Can I ask, did they know you were military and saying the things that they were saying, or was it more that you were an outsider coming in?
When you tell somebody to do something in the military as a leader, they automatically do it, and they know how to do it, and that they ask you, and you show them how to do it.
Yeah.
In the civilian world, they'll stamp all over you. They don't get it done because they don't show up on time. They hate the job that they're getting paid no money for. And by the way, you just walked in and you're telling me what to do. Who are you to tell me what to do?
Yeah, okay.
And then there's this disconnect of human thought process and communication, that they think they're better than you and they're going to do what they do and not what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm a change agent. So when I go into a building or I go into an operation, I first watch what they do. That's my MO. When I started at Trump, years later, Trump Taj Mahal, it was the biggest job I've ever taken. It was, the casino did $784 million a year. He had 4 of them. The food and beverage did about $15 million a year. He came to me and he put his feet on the desk and he said, how do I make more money? And I said to him, you have to buy futures. But first we have to fix the culture of these because it was the same thing. Mm. We had 13 restaurants and all these kind of things in every one of these 4 casinos, but nobody cared. They would come in, swipe the card in, and they would go to another casino and work 8 hours, then come back and swipe out. So I had all these employees, 1,132 employees in 1 casino each, right? And they weren't in this casino. They were working somewhere over there, but getting paid here. Hmm. So my first 4 months of joining that casino was sitting in bathrooms at night, sounds really weird, male bathrooms, and listening to the conversations that were going on about drugs, about theft, about you name it. I listened and I wrote down for 4 months overnight what was going on. Then when I put a uniform on, I fired 300 people. Mm-hmm. If you ever seen the movie Roadhouse, that was my car. I had a Honda Civic, which I leased, that sat in a parking space for 2 years damaged because they literally wrecked it.
Yeah, I mean, nobody can be happy with somebody kind of doing
change,
that, of course.
People don't like change.
Yeah.
And I became that change agent of, okay, how do we get a group of people together that are like-minded,
yes,
that want to do a good job, not for the company, for each other, that by osmosis did the company right. Yeah. And I think that was a big change in me because I took the military mentality into the civilian world.
How have you applied that through the foundation? I mean, I know the answer, but I want to hear it, and I think it's very valuable for those that will hear this.
The foundation is that in 2014 we started the foundation. I'd worked with Sinise and various other foundations and making money for them. But I wanted to do something different. I really wanted to focus. We're in the height of the war in Afghanistan. They were building houses. They were giving wheelchairs and all those kind of things. I wanted to be different. I didn't want to be the general run-of-the-mill foundation. So I wanted to do mental health and physical health. So that's the path that we took. Yes, I go with other foundations that cook meals. So if you think during the height of the war, we would go to all the hospitals. I would cook for 8,000 to 10,000 people in them hospitals. It's nowadays, fantastic. We don't have that. But that's how I started to feel differently about the mental, because I've been traveling around the world, and I do still to this day, 345 days a year.
I'm aware and I'm amazed.
And 150 of those were the military, and then listening to the stories of these people that I was seeing in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Poland. And I think for me, there was nobody addressing those things. Mm-hmm. And that's why we started the foundation. Yeah. And originally the foundation was, look, we're going to make money. We're going to pass the money out to different foundations to do good work. And then at one point I said, I want to start our own programs with mental health, with physical health. And that's why we started the mobility devices, right? We have
specifically
1,500 double amputees on the war on terror. The VA wasn't giving them what they needed from a care perspective for the physical injuries. So Dean Kamen, the Segway invented this Mobius device that stands you up eye height, which is a great way to converse. You don't feel, if you're able-bodied before and now you're a double amputee, it's very demoralizing. You talk about post-traumatic stress, and one of the first people I met was a guy named Gadsden, Greg Gadsden. You may have watched him in a movie, Warship. Double amputee, but still was a garrison commander. As the first ever as a double amputee, active duty garrison commander. He was on my board, great friend of mine. But he was an amazing football player before he lost his legs.
Serving is how he lost his legs.
And I wanted to learn more about how do we. And I didn't understand the stigma at that point. I didn't. I was more, how do I give help to them? How do I help them, physically first? The mental piece came after, where I would sit and I watch, and Greg was one of those that turned to alcohol. He'll tell you himself. I think he's been here in actual fact somewhere. But he will tell you to numb the feelings and the thought processes, he turned to alcohol. Other people turned to drugs and whatever else. That's what I started to understand, that physical and mental health and food are all interactive.
Yes, very much so.
And being around those on the trips that we do, even today, I get to learn more about some of the triggers, and not all of them, because everybody's different. And some of the childhood behavior, because I was one of those people, and the anxiety and the desperation, the loss of soul and self, and the loss of purpose.
Yeah. I can speak to that in my own experience, and that's leading to my next question. My experience of becoming disabled for a period of time due to illness, and then that leading to my own, what I would say is incomparable to the post-traumatic stress, which is another problem, is that we diminish our own pain. Yeah. And Adam Bornstein, his wife, has coined the phrase of there's no hierarchy of pain, and we shouldn't do that, but still yet I do. Yeah. There are lots of things I probably shouldn't do that I do. And for me, when all that was going on, it became apparent that talking about it helped. So that's how this podcast got going, and why we're ended up sitting here and discussing this. But I'm really curious the landscape of the mental health conversation, right? So I'm new to this. I've started this within the last year, and I'm learning as I go. And I'm curious, from your experience approaching it 10 years ago, at that point, how have you seen the landscape alter or change, or has it not by much? What's your take on that?
10 years ago, I go back 50 years ago. And I wasn't even born. Well, I was born then, but just little. Nobody understood or nobody cared for our World War II veterans that came home, our Vietnam veterans that came home, because we didn't have a concept of trauma. What is trauma? What did they see? And I mentioned something in here last night at dinner. One of the true processes of trauma, and I go back to World War II, and you'll understand this if you ever watched the movie Fury. Oh, yeah. Do you know what that movie was actually about?
From what I recall, it was a group of soldiers who were basically taking out as many people as they could, and overtook tanks. And
I'll give you a real.
Yeah, tell me the real what it was about. I should have just said
because it was 4 tanks that were asked to hold a crossroads that were vital to the Allied invasion.
Right. Thank you.
And the commander who was played by Brad Pitt, of the one tank that was left, because the other three got said, look, I'm going to put this tank here, and I'm going to die on this tank, because that's what I've been asked to do. The rest of you guys can leave, head over to the hills, go. They all decided to stay. A whole battalion of German panzers were coming over the hill. They had a lookout. He ran back, told them he's coming. Funny thing is, they held off the whole battalion, which was retreating, funnily enough. Four of the five were killed in the tank. One of them, and I'll tell you who it was in a second, actually burrowed himself through the bottom of the tank and covered himself with mud. And at one point when the SS were going past the tank, an SS soldier looked under the tank and saw this soldier, totally ignored him. He should have shot him, but totally ignored him and walked on. Do you know who that person was that was under the tank?
I do not.
Audie Murphy.
Why do I not? I know the name, but I don't know the
Audie
name.
Murphy is a very famous actor.
Okay.
He got the Congressional Medal of Honor for that action. And when he talked about, became famous because he was a great actor, and you should read the story, but he talks about what his fear was in this whole battle. And I think his fear was slightly different to somebody else's fear, and so on and so on. But it gets really in depth when you talk about how he grew up, how he joined the military, how he ended up in this position, what he did afterwards, and how he was treated when he came back from war. Just like our B&M veterans that turned to alcohol and drugs, and they were spat on and demoralized. And I have Medal of Honor recipients. Today, there's 63 living Medal of Honor recipients that still have very bad PTSD, no matter if they talk to a psychiatrist or a specialist, and they get together every year, even Afghanistan, Paul's friends, Afghanistan, Iraq veterans.
Yeah, we've talked about that, yeah.
And it's hard for them still to process, and the only way they process that pain and post-traumatic stress is by conversation with each other that have walked in their shoes. And I say this because sometimes it's easier for me to cook you a meal or make you a cup of coffee and sit and do this on a porch or wherever by a pool and say, hey, I'm feeling this way. Did you ever feel that way? Have you ever felt that way? Why am I feeling this way? And it's hard, even though you have a support system in the military and support system in the first responder community, it's still very hard to ask for help because we feel it's a weakness, because we don't understand that it's happening to us, and then we're afraid that somebody else won't understand why or what's happening to us.
Yeah, I think there's a social construct in that we've all been somewhat imprinted with, whether it's the idea that we're supposed to be strong enough to handle our own stuff and not go to others with it, or if it's just the general cultural, attending to work, or whatever that might be, where we don't address those things first. My thought is really just, what good are these bodies if our minds are not sound enough to operate long-term and sustainably? And that's why we're here. Let's talk about...
But you asked me the question.
Yeah.
I want to finish that question.
Excuse me, Chef.
Because
Yes.
I feel today, in 2024, it's become such a big issue. We are making strides here specifically, and making great strides. But our military is making great strides in now units have psychiatrists, they have dietitians, they have these physical therapists, they have screenings, they have buddy checks. All these things have started to happen because the groundswell movement that we're doing, that you've started and others have started, is started to really grab the nation's attention. We're not there financially yet, but at least we're there proportionally. There's still a long way to go, but at least it's okay now. The senior leadership of our military is saying, hey, look, we've got these resources. If you need something, say something. So I feel the shift in the universe to say it's okay to come and ask for help. Now we've got, the process now is we've got to make sure we have the fundamental help to help those that understand. And the chief this morning, bless him.
I was going to bring this up. Please go ahead. Yeah.
The fundamental is that we have to have people that understand the trauma that the individual's gone through. Yeah. In other words, they've walked in the shoes instead of a general psychologist that deals with maybe children or something, or doesn't have the specific specialization to treat or talk to that person.
Yes.
And I think that's where we fail today, but it's getting there. And I think there's legislative change that needs to happen with insurance companies that we talked about earlier.
Sure.
To allow these specialists or access to these specialists and have more of them.
Yeah. And I obviously understanding that we're in a capitalistic society and a lot of this is driven by the bottom line and what the what the municipalities or whatever is funding, whoever's funding these things, but that shouldn't be the deciding factor, right? We should be taking care of the people that are taking care of us. And you've been doing that in a big way, showing up all over the world for a long time, with your foundation and just personally, I know that's like why you're traveling, is to make sure you do everything you can. And that's very admirable. We can all learn from that. In this community, we're learning firsthand about that. And Chief, thank you, because you have helped me understand the unique challenges here. And while those unique challenges are going on, there's also a lot of positive work being done, that needs to be recognized too. There's a co-response model here in Eagle County that's Vail Health, Behavioral Health, Your Hope Center, that they're activating, that is evidential for our country to take note of. And I want to speak to, that idea that having the right people, helping people, who have certain types of problems is essential. And what I see happening here is very worthy of recognition, that having that response from the people that are properly trained is evidentially helping those people. And it's also freeing up the first responders who would have gone there and who weren't trained or aren't trained for that. They're able to respond to the emergencies that are right for what their training is. And so, we are making those steps, and I want to recognize some of the good work as well as some of the space that we still have to fill.
But we've got to be better.
Yes.
And let me say, there are pockets of excellence, right? There are pockets of excellence around this country. We're here in one. I'm still learning, as we all are, of how to approach, how to deal with, how to help. But the way we fast track this, and by the way, I don't mean in 6 months or a year we're gonna solve the world's problems. But the way we fast track this to legislative change is by collectively sharing information and helping each other in a coalition to say, hey, look, here we are, Eagle Valley or the Valley, Vail, and this area is doing this, and this is how these are the results that we're getting here. And that should be shared with everybody as is, because the more power we have collectively, the bigger and the faster the change happens.
100%.
And I feel that, there are, again, pockets of excellence around the country on a lot of things. But I want to make that change. I want no person to suffer and have to get to that point I talked about Anthony Bourdain or Taylor Krieger or the list is endless. Because the military are using this number. In fact, they're not anymore, because 22 a day, we're way past that a long time ago. And I feel that with social, economic issues, right? And we talked about that this morning. The smartphone thing, the bullying, the society's opinion of what you should look like, what you should be like.
Yeah.
I think all those are played into where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could go off on a huge tangent about the importance of us being our authentic selves. And I was talking to Bob, not the other Robert in your camp that's here in Beaver Creek. Bob mentioned how once he became more allowed himself to be that authentic self, it freed him into this better chapter of his life. And I think there's something that's a big lesson in that. And I wonder, with your career, when you found your authentic self in the way you were finding your purpose, in the way you were going to, create community. And there's an analogy here that I spoke about last night about the aspen trees. And I used to think the aspen trees were like a sole root system for each tree. However, it's that they have a community root system. And even if those trees were to be burned, which happens in the mountains, and fires can be a natural thing, not just started by some dummy throwing a cigarette out the window on a highway or something. Those trees, they may be gone, but their roots are there. And it's that communal strength that builds them back up and allows for new growth.
And you have communal strength in groups of societies, right? So, the military, the firefighters, the pockets of, in fact, here is kind of unique, because those what I'm learning from last night was those groups of people, our first responders, are intertwined in everything they do here, which is not necessarily the case in other states, right? I think because this is a small area, the police chief knows what, is it the same place where the fire chief or the detective or whoever is. So I think that's another part of how do we get that common thread between the forces that shares the information, or the newest information.
I mean, that's continuing to have these conversations, allowing there to be space and encouraging people to see people actively leading by just talking about what's going on for them and listening to it, right?
Which is great. But because when you put somebody on a stage, I'm not talking about us, but if you put a plate of food in front of them, it breaks the barriers of insecurity, because now I'm feeding you. When I cook for someone, somebody says to me, so when you cook, what's your favorite dish? And I don't have a favorite dish to cook. I have a favorite group of people that I love to cook for. That's those wearing the uniform, my first responders. And that can be a hot dog, a piece of chicken, a 4-course meal. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that we put a plate of food in front of somebody, and all of a sudden, the police officer goes away, the firefighter goes away, the soldier goes away, and it becomes a safe space to converse about issues. So I do it with my kids. I take the phones away. They're not allowed to have phones in my house while we're having dinner.
Yeah.
We talk, and I wrote a book called The Family Table years ago that we have got such a busy society that we don't spend the time together anymore around a kitchen table or a family table to talk about what's going on in the lives of kids. And I think all these, not all, but a lot of these issues stem from childhood, because there's abuse, there's neglect, there's, all the things that the chief talked about this morning.
Sure.
Which he's so bang on, because I write about it in the book.
Yeah. Parents have to work 2 jobs. They leave the kids. The kids don't get the attention. Then
then they start playing up and they start going out and they start doing things. They join gangs. And I'm not saying every kid, just in general. I'm being kind of overview. And then they get into a bad thing. And then they end up with the law, either get put away. And then what happens when they get incarcerated instead of rehabilitation? Because rehabilitation can happen, not for everybody, but when they go into that big institution, they learn more about crime and hurting people than they do if we took a different approach. So I don't think putting people in prison for small things is a good way, because they grow big things from that. But it's interesting when you surround yourself, and I surround myself with great people that are way smarter than me, that can guide me and have different opinions to me. My kids are now 24 and 22, two girls. One works as a pediatric speech pathologist in Johns Hopkins, and one's a lawyer. They have different opinions than Dad does.
As they should. They have different experiences.
And I want to hear them opinions, because that's how we get better at understanding people.
Yeah.
And I think, and I said this, so I'm going to repeat it, but food is that medium that says, if I put every head of state in the free world around a table and said, okay, we're going to cook you a national dish, and you're going to talk about your dish for 10 minutes and why this is so important to this country, take a bite, pass it to the right. And if we did that, we wouldn't have half of the problems that we do in this world, because most of these problems that we find are cultural.
Yeah, agreed.
And we can change that narrative, just like we can change the understanding of mental health and behavioral health, and why kids do things, why adults do things. Mm-hmm. And it's by learning and listening. And I think that's one thing I've learned over the past, my shows have been running for 15 years, whatever.
Yeah. We didn't even talk about all the TV stuff.
And if you look at the shows, when I started, it was military. It was my way. I don't care about what you think. This is what we're going to do. Mm. And on the last 5 years, I've really learned to shut up, listen to what their process and their thought process is, in order to help them succeed, not only in their business, but also in their family lives. Because I think we don't listen enough. We, as a professional guy, I've got 48 hours to change a life, a business life. I go in, I'm like, okay, this is what works. Bum, 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 bum. And by the way, I've had some great successes. And the ones I thought that would be successful failed because they didn't understand. Mm. So I've learned myself to listen more and be more open to their wants and needs, as opposed to me trying to fix that.
I get that. I hear you loud and clear. That's a wonderful point. 2 questions for you left, and then we got to wrap up. The question I wasn't thinking of asking you, but because of what you just said, I'm going to ask you about failure. I used to see failure as something to avoid. I'm curious, that opinion has shifted recently in my mind for what that is. But I'm curious, in your life, someone who's very successful and has been involved in so many different things. What's a failure that you faced that taught you a lot in a certain lane, and how have you applied that to the rest of your career and life, personal, whatever, professional, whatever you'd like to share?
I wrote a book last year called Overcoming Impossible, and I talk about L's and W's, mm-hmm. losses and wins. Uh-huh. How many failures have I had in life? I can count them on, if I can do this 50 times, I've had failures. Yeah. And that's in some failures that are caused by me. I give you one. When I was working at Trump Taj Mahal, I started a side business feeding the military flank steaks. So I would toss the flank steaks in seasoning, box them up, then send them off. And I'd hired a company, Tops Meats. They're no longer around, but they were the largest hamburger producer in the world. They got listeria, shut the plant. It failed my business. because I couldn't continue to do it. I needed the volume to feed. Another failure of my business is I thought things would work and I didn't really think them through. One of them was an iced tea, funnily enough, that was a performance iced tea. And I was so sure this was clinically proven to be amazing. We went out on the market price of $3.99. It failed miserably, but I was stuck with 100,000 cases of this thing. I'd done a deal with Coca-Cola, and one of the things they said, "Oh, you got to get rid of the iced tea." So that was my excuse for getting rid of the iced tea, but it failed miserably.
Yeah.
I think you have to have failure. I failed my first marriage, right? So I think failure. I was married for 15 years before I met my wife now. Been together for 15 years. So I think failure is an opportunity to get better. One thing I would say about failure, you can't fail the same thing twice. Because that just means that you're not focused on what that failure was. You haven't learned the lesson of failure.
I see. Yeah.
So, look, we go into all businesses, from drones to clothing to food to all the things that we do, and we try to negate failure as much as possible. But look, I can't control the world. Sure. I can't control what people do. I can only control what I'm responsible for. And I can tell you, failures, they're just a springboard to success. And it's okay to fail. I've accepted failure on many occasions. I had to do it publicly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can't avoid. I'm a TV guy with 170 countries and 1 billion viewers a week. And when you have to apologize for something, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because it's humbling. Failure's okay. I'm okay with failure.
Me too. That's what I've learned as well, is that it helps you reach your goals in a new way. It teaches you something that springboards you in that way.
It makes you work harder.
Yeah.
It's like you trying to play a song, right? Or master a skill. It's the same with me trying to cook a dish that I've never cooked before. It's okay.
Yeah.
It may taste, my kids were like, "Oh, Dad, that's garbage." I'm like, "Oh, why?" There's no recipe for success.
Yeah.
Recipes are a guide, same as music. And I use music, food, and art a lot in when I talk about music with the score, recipes with ingredients, and art, meaning if you're in a good mood, you play very different music than if you're in a sad mood. The same with an artist. If it's hot, cold, wet, miserable, and you're not feeling it, your impression or your painting is different. The same with food. We cook very different food when we're in a good mood.
Yeah.
They're really interconnected.
That's interesting to me.
I did a whole paper on it because I felt that Impressionism and the great musicians of our time and composers of our time were like great chefs. The note isn't there, the ingredient isn't there, and the feeling isn't there. You don't get the magic to happen.
Yeah. I'm fully on board with that analogy.
I see you when you play. You're a whole different human being because it gives you joy, just like cooking does for me.
Yeah.
We go to a place that is euphoric.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important. The euphoria that I have when I watch you guys play or people eat food that I cooked, it makes me feel good that we've done something. I go to bed at night feeling really proud of the team that I have that work relentlessly. We don't have hours of operation. We work 24 hours a day. And at the end of a phone to make things better for other people. And I think what you do, apart from the podcast, which is changing lives, what you do in music is the same as I do in food. It separates, or TV, it separates you from your real world for a couple of hours to feel good so you can go and face what you're going to face next.
Thank you. That was a fantastic response. I fully feel that, and that is an incredible lead-in to my final question, and it's about music. I like to ask people if there's, as part of each podcast now, if there's a song that personally inspired you and had an effect on your life, and what that might be and why. I know
You're
this
gonna
is
put
a
me on
good
the
one
spot here because you're
love
gonna
doing
laugh
this.
at me right
I've
now.
been waiting to put you on the spot. It's very difficult to pull that off.
So you'll laugh at me. I'm a very old school guy. So when I work out, I listen to military band music. It inspires me, invigorates me. But before every TV show and every big event I've ever done in my life, there's a song that I play.
Perfect.
It's called The Winner Takes It All by ABBA. And I have that on my, I know you'll laugh, right? I know. But it would set me, before I did a TV show, Dinner Impossible, Restaurant Impossible, it would put me in a mindset to focus on the task at hand. The military band music when I work out is escapism.
Yeah.
You know, so they're my go-to things. Obviously, I love OAR.
Thank you.
Obviously, but for me, when I'm going to do something that's really, cook for a president, cook for heads of state, make something out of nothing look pretty for a visiting head of state or whatever, I have to focus and I have to think outside the box to make that experience so unique that's never. There's one thing I'm very proud of on our TV shows. I've never reproduced one dish in 15 years of any TV show.
Something we have in common in the analogy you just gave is that we never play the same song the same way twice. Yeah. It's the same idea, I think, of trying to keep it fresh for those that are going to enjoy what you do as much as for yourself. And there's a therapy in that of, constantly creating anew. Chef, I can't thank you enough for the honor of just being open and speaking with me about all of this. I've learned a lot. I hope everybody who hears this has learned a lot. I appreciate that this was my first opportunity to do this in front of an audience in person rather than just on the internet. And I'd like to close all the episodes by saying, be good to yourselves and be good to others. We'll see you next time. Thank you.